Every day, someone quietly walks into a Catholic church for the very first time. Not because they were raised Catholic, not because someone forced them, but because, after searching almost everywhere else, they believe they may have found something worth staying for. At the very same moment that millions continue to leave the church, thousands of others are choosing to remain, and many are choosing to return. Why? What do they see that others no longer see? The answer is far more surprising than most people realize. In our last episode, we explored one of the biggest religious shifts of our time. We followed the numbers, the scandals, and the reasons so many people walked away from the Catholic Church. But every story has another side. Because while one exodus continues, another movement has quietly begun. This is that story. Every exodus has two sides. For every family that quietly stopped attending Mass, there is another family that never left. And, increasingly, a new generation is choosing to walk through those doors for the very first time. It would be easy to tell only the story of decline. The numbers are real, and we do not deny them. But if we only look at the empty pews, we miss half of what is happening in the Catholic Church today. Because behind the headlines about collapse, something else has been quietly taking shape. Something researchers themselves did not expect to find. To understand why, we have to go back to the data. But this time, we're asking a different question. Not, why did they leave? But, why did they stay? In December 2025, the Pew Research Center released one of the most comprehensive studies ever conducted on religious identity in the United States. The research surveyed nearly 9,000 adults and was paired with a broader landscape study of almost 37,000 more. Researchers expected to confirm the familiar story. Fewer Americans in the pews, year after year, a steady drift towards secularism. And in many ways, that long decline is still visible. But the report uncovered something few expected. The decline itself appears to be slowing. And in some measures, it may even be leveling off. Weekly prayer, monthly worship attendance, the percentage of Americans who still identify as Christian. After nearly 2 decades of steady decline, the line on the graph has begun, ever so slightly, to flatten. For the Catholic Church specifically, the picture is far more complex than the headlines suggest. Yes, retention remains lower than in many other American religious traditions. But the same report asked a question researchers rarely ask. Of the people who never left, why did they stay? What kept them? The answers reveal something. The story of the Exodus has never fully explained. According to the Pew study, more than half of Catholics who never left say their faith continues to meet a real spiritual need in their lives. A similar number point to something even simpler. They still believe. They continue to embrace the teachings of the Church, not out of habit, but out of conviction. Nearly half say their faith gives their lives a sense of meaning they have found nowhere else. Then come the quieter reasons. A sense of community, people who are there for you, in a hospital waiting room, at a funeral, or at 3 o'clock in the morning. Familiarity, the comfort of a liturgy that has remained essentially unchanged for 2,000 years in a world where almost everything else seems to change every 18 months. And tradition, not as nostalgia, but as an inheritance. A rosary passed from a grandmother's hands to her granddaughter's. Notice what is missing from that list. It is not political pressure. It is not fear of hell recited from memory. It is something much deeper, a sense of belonging, a commitment to truth. Two things modern life constantly promises, but rarely delivers. Perhaps that is the real answer hidden inside the statistics. People are not staying Catholic because no one told them they were free to leave. They stay because, in a world where almost everything changes, the Church offers something that does not. If there is one plot twist in this entire story, it is this. The generation raised with the least religion in American history may also be the generation quietly reviving it. A Harvard University election study tracked something remarkable. The share of Gen Z Americans identifying as Catholic rose from 15% in 2022 to 21% just 1 year later. Around the same time, the Barna Group found that Gen Z and millennial Christians are now attending church more often than any older generation measured, nearly 2 weekends a month, roughly double the rate from just 5 years earlier. And the surprise inside the surprise? Much of this shift is being driven by young men. Researchers and campus ministers point to a generation of young men who describe feeling adrift, lonely, without clear direction, uncertain what it even means to be a man in modern culture. Where secular culture offers noise, the Church offers something structured: discipline, brotherhood, purpose, and an unapologetic moral order. At college campuses across the country, chaplains describe scenes that would have seemed unthinkable a decade ago. Record numbers of students entering the church through the rite of Christian initiation, Newman centers overflowing at daily Mass, waiting lists for confirmation classes. In Nebraska, in Ohio, in New Jersey, priests describe the same pattern. Young adults who grew up with no religious background at all, finding their way to a Catholic pew through a podcast, a YouTube debate, or simply a friend who invited them once and never stopped inviting them. Their reasons rarely sound the way outsiders expect. It is not primarily nostalgia for a past they never lived. It is a hunger for something solid. Ancient liturgy, incense, silence, a faith that asks something of them instead of simply agreeing with whatever they already believed. In an age of infinite choice and constant self-invention, the fixed and unchanging has become unexpectedly attractive. Even in Europe, where decades of decline seemed almost irreversible, small but unmistakable signs of change have begun to appear. In the United Kingdom, researchers found something that would have been almost impossible to imagine a generation ago. Young Catholics, under the age of 30, now outnumber young Anglicans by more than 2 to 1. In the very country that broke away from Rome 5 centuries ago. In Belgium, baptisms among teenagers and adults have nearly tripled over the past decade. And in Dublin, parishes are reporting nearly twice as many adult baptisms at Easter compared with just 1 year earlier. Some are newcomers to the country, but many are lifelong residents choosing the Catholic faith for the very first time. In France, a 3-day pilgrimage from Paris to the Cathedral of Chartres, centered on the ancient Latin Mass, attracted the largest crowd in its history in 2025. Registration closed within days. Thousands were placed on a waiting list. The average age of the pilgrims? Just 20 years old. Across Europe, a phrase has quietly begun appearing in newspaper headlines: a quiet revival. Social media has played an unexpected role. Priests, nuns, and lay Catholics with hundreds of thousands of followers are teaching the faith through videos that last little more than 60 seconds. How to pray the rosary, how to go to confession, how to begin reading the Bible without feeling overwhelmed. For a generation that discovers almost everything online, faith has simply followed them there. It is not a flood, but in a continent where decline has dominated the story for decades, even the smallest ripple is worth noticing. If Europe was the heart of Catholicism for centuries, Africa may become its heartbeat in the century ahead. According to the Vatican's own statistical office, the number of Catholics in Africa grew from 281 million in 2023 to more than 288 million in 2024 alone. Today, more than 1 out of every 5 Catholics in the world lives in Africa, and that share continues to grow. At the same time, Europe's share continues to decline. The Democratic Republic of the Congo is now home to roughly 55 million Catholics. Nigeria adds another 35 million. Together, they rank among the largest Catholic populations on Earth. Countries that many Western Catholics have never imagined as becoming the new center of gravity for the global Church. Unlike much of the world, the number of priests, seminarians, and men and women in religious life continues to grow across Africa. Even as vocations decline through much of Europe and the Americas, they continue to rise across much of the African continent. In some seminaries, in Nigeria, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and Uganda, qualified applicants have even been turned away simply because there is no more room. That growing importance has not gone unnoticed by the Vatican. In recent years, papal visits to African nations have reflected the continent's increasing role in the life of the Catholic Church. Church leaders now speak of Africa not simply as a mission field, but as one of the Church's greatest sources of faith, vocations, and hope for the future. Perhaps the most remarkable change is one few people ever expected. For generations, missionaries traveled from Europe to evangelize Africa. Today, the movement is increasingly going in the opposite direction. African priests and missionaries are now serving in parishes across Europe and North America, helping sustain communities that once sent missionaries to them. Of course, we should also be honest about why this growth is happening. Researchers point out that much of it reflects demographics. Africa is the youngest and fastest growing continent on Earth. Catholic families there are simply having more children who are then baptized into the Church. This is not, in most places, a wave of dramatic adult conversions like the one we saw among Generation Z in the United States. But even that explanation comes with an extraordinary conclusion. At a time when much of the world has watched religious faith decline with each new generation, the African Church has not followed that pattern. It has remained strong, and it has continued to grow. Church leaders across the continent see something far greater than statistics. Nearly 2/3 of Africa's population is under the age of 35. Many bishops believe that within a single generation, Africa could become both the demographic and the spiritual heart of global Catholicism. A place where future popes, future missionaries, and future saints may be just as likely to come from as Rome or Boston.
Go well, my children.
Thank you, Father.
But Africa is only one part of a much larger story, because the same question is being asked across the world. Why do millions of Catholics still choose to remain? To answer that, we now turn to another continent, a place where the story is every bit as complex. Latin America, a region that has experienced enormous change. There is no denying it. In many countries, the Catholic share of the population has declined over recent decades. Yet that is only part of the story, because even after those changes, Catholicism remains by far the largest Christian tradition across Latin America. From Brazil to Mexico, from Colombia to Peru, millions still call the Catholic Church their spiritual home. And perhaps even more remarkable, faith itself has proven far more resilient than religious affiliation. Across the region, belief in God remains remarkably strong, even among many people who no longer identify with any religion. In Brazil, more than 3 out of every 4 Catholics say they pray every day. In Colombia, the numbers are nearly as high. Part of that resilience can be found in a movement that many outside Latin America have never heard of: the Catholic Charismatic Renewal. Born from the same spiritual hunger that drew millions toward Pentecostal churches, it offered something unique: joyful worship, healing prayer, a personal encounter with Christ, the gifts of the Holy Spirit. All of it without leaving the Catholic Church. Today, an estimated 73 million Catholics across Latin America identify with the Catholic Charismatic Renewal. Walk into a Sunday Mass in Sao Paulo, Bogota, or countless other cities, and you may find people singing with joy, hands raised in worship, prayers for healing, a congregation fully engaged, a liturgy that is not simply remembered, but lived. Then came another historic moment. In 2013, for the first time in more than 2,000 years, the Catholic Church elected a pope from Latin America. For millions of Catholics, from Buenos Aires to Lima, that moment became far more than a historical milestone. It was a reminder that the Catholic Church belongs to every nation, every culture, and every people. And for many believers, it renewed a deep sense of belonging, hope, and faith. 4 continents, 4 different stories. The United States, where a generation raised with almost no religion at all is little by little walking back through those doors. Europe, where the decline continues, but not without its own small, stubborn countercurrents. Africa, where a young and vibrant church is quietly becoming one of the largest in the world. And Latin America, where, even as fewer people check the box marked Catholic, the ones who remain are praying, singing, and raising their hands with an intensity that would surprise almost anyone. 4 stories, but underneath all of them, the same thread. In a culture that promises endless reinvention, they have found something that does not ask them to reinvent themselves, but to be transformed. In a culture of infinite scrolling and constant noise, they have found a silence that does not feel empty. In a culture that measures worth by attention and achievement, they have found a church that tells them their value was never in question to begin with. The Exodus is real. We will not pretend otherwise. But alongside it, something else is happening. Smaller, quieter, and far less reported. A return, not of an entire culture all at once, but one person at a time. A young man walking into a Newman Center because a friend would not stop inviting him. A mother lighting a candle she cannot fully explain. A grandmother in Manila, in Lagos, whose quiet, uncelebrated faith turns out, in the end, to be exactly what her grandchildren were searching for. Two stories are unfolding inside the Catholic Church at the same time. One of departure, one of return. Both are true. Both matter. And perhaps the future of this 2,000-year-old church will not be decided only in Rome or in the United States, but just as much in Kinshasa and in a college dorm room in Nebraska. But the numbers can only take us so far, because statistics can tell us how many people leave. They can tell us how many return, but they cannot fully explain why. Many who come back eventually discover something simple. The Catholic Church has never claimed that her members are perfect. From the very beginning, she has been made of ordinary men and women, people capable of extraordinary holiness and also of human weakness. Yet those who return do not return because they believe Catholics are perfect. They return because they believe Jesus Christ is. They believe he truly died. They believe he truly rose again. And they believe he is still alive. Calling people home. Christianity has never promised a life without suffering. It has never promised wealth, success, or comfort. It promises something far greater. That suffering is not the end. That death is not the end. And that beyond this life, there is the hope of eternal life with God. For Catholics, that hope is not simply an idea. It has a place where they believe heaven touches earth, the Holy Mass. No survey can measure what it means for millions of people to kneel before the altar and believe that through the mystery of the Eucharist, what appears to be bread and wine has truly become the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ. No chart can explain the peace found in confession, the strength received through the sacraments, or the quiet certainty that God has not abandoned his people. The Church is holy not because every one of her members is holy, but because Christ is holy. And for millions of Catholics, that changes everything. The same faith that has drawn countless souls back to Christ has also shaped history. It inspired the founding of some of the world's first great hospitals, some of its oldest universities, countless schools, orphanages, religious orders, missionaries, and generations of ordinary believers who cared for the sick, educated the forgotten, welcomed the abandoned, and served the poor, because they believed they were serving Christ himself. We are not here to glorify an institution. we are here to understand a faith that has endured for 2,000 years, not because it asks people to place their hope in men, but because it invites them to place their hope in the risen Christ. So in our next episode, we stop counting and we start looking. We step inside the mystery at the center of it all, the Eucharist, the sacraments that accompany an entire life from birth to death, the beauty of a Mass that many have seen, but few have truly understood. Because maybe the real answer to why millions still choose this faith was never going to be found in a chart. Maybe it was always exactly where they say they found it, on their knees, in silence, before the risen Christ.